Greetings, sorors. I am Soror Tanya Jacobs, a proud member of Nu Lambda Omega. I am the co-chair of Target 5 Global Impact, where my focus is the Pillowcase project. For this project, sorors use pillowcases to make dresses for girls and shirts for boys. The dresses and shirts are then sent to Haiti for children in need. There are lots of videos and patterns for the dresses, but resources and instructions for a simple shirt are harder to come by. So I, along with Target 5 Chair Soror Andrea Taylor, designed a quick and easy method for making pillowcase shirts. Follow along with the video and you'll be making your own shirts in no time. So let's get started.
You're going to need a pillowcase, some matching bias tape, and your basic sewing notions: a ruler, some straight pins, scissors, and thread. You're also going to need a pencil to mark your fabric. So before we get started, make sure you do a quick iron of your pillowcase to make it nice and crisp. It makes a difference in the final product. First thing we're going to do is lay out our pillowcase. At the open end here, you'll notice that there's a finished edge with some stitching, usually on pillowcases. We're going to cut this off. It becomes important later. So now we can take this cut piece, set it aside for another project. What you're left with is a raw edge along the opening. So now what we're going to do is take the raw open edge, fold it in half to meet the top closed edge, and turn it like this. The next step is to form the sleeves and the sides of the shirt. So what we have to do is measure 4 inches in and cut down. In order to do that, we need to find the midpoint of the fabric and measure 4 inches in. Now we can do this a couple of ways. You can take your ruler and find the middle point, which is about right here on this fabric, and you can mark it with your pencil. Or what I like to do is just take the fabric, fold it in half, and finger press so we can know where the midpoint is. Give it a good press. Depending on the type of fabric that you have, it'll show up. Now, the midpoint is here. You don't have to mark. Next, we take our ruler, put 4 inches at the edge, right underneath that midpoint, and mark. Take your pencil, draw, and then turn it this way at that point, and from the midpoint, mark it down. So now you have from the edge to the middle and down. And we're going to take our scissors and we're going to cut. So now we've cut this away, and you should see the sleeves forming along with the side. So earlier we cut off the bottom part, which left the raw edge here, but we still have a closed edge here. So what I want you to do is just take your scissors, pull it out, and cut so that you open up that sleeve and stop at the edge. When you cut open the sleeve, usually there's a little seam allowance left. So we're just going to cut that off to make it even with the edge of the other sleeve. And now your sleeves are even and match. The next step is to make the neckline. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our ruler And along the folded edge, we're going to measure 2 inches down. 1, 2. We're going to make our mark. And then we're going to take our ruler and measure 4 inches across the top and mark it. So you have a mark 2 inches down and 4 inches across. So to make the collar or the neckline, we're going to make from the 2-inch mark a shallow C over to the 4-inch mark. If you're comfortable freehanding that, you can. But a trick is to take a paper plate, line up the curve with the 4-inch mark and the 2-inch mark, and just trace that along. So once you've made your mark, go ahead and cut around the neckline. Take this piece and discard. Next step, open up your shirt. Does it look like a shirt now? Looking less like a pillowcase and more like a shirt, right? So, looking at the bottom, it's still closed. So we need to do the same thing that we did for the sleeve and cut it open. So next we're going to open up the shirt and lay it flat so that the neckline is in the middle. If your seams at the shoulders are not laying flat, go ahead and give them a quick iron and make sure that these seams are going in the same direction. This is going this way and this seam is going this way. Next we're going to pin our bias tape around the collar. And it's bias tape because it's a little stretchy. And so it fits around the curves very nicely. So open up your bias tape. For the first end, what we're going to do is fold our bias tape over about a 1/2 inch, like this. And then we're going to put that right against the shoulder seam and pin it there. Let's see that a little closer up. Take the fold it in about a 1/2 inch, put it against the shoulder seam and flush with the edge of the collar and pin it. Continue pinning the bias tape around the collar, making sure that the edge of your bias tape is flush with the edge of your neckline. Take as many pins as you need. So we've got it pinned all the way around, flush with the neckline of the shirt. When you get to the end, make sure that you leave some overlap with the beginning. So here's where we started, and here's where we're ending. Maybe about 1 inch. Just eyeball it, it doesn't have to be exact, and cut it off. So you have about this much left over. So finally, we move to the sewing machine sorors. So go to where your bias tape begins, but don't start right there. Go a little bit past that. What we're gonna do is we're gonna line up our needle here with the fold right here. Lower your presser foot and lower your needle manually to make sure that it hits where you want it to hit. I just need to move over just a little bit. Then you start sewing around, but make sure that the fabric on top and the fabric underneath is lying flat. Remove your pins as you go along so it doesn't hit your needle. As you're coming close to the end, you'll remember that we didn't sew down this part. So what we want to do now is make sure we'll take our end and overlap it to our beginning fold. Make sure that they line up and sew right across there. You see that it's overlapping. And this will come into play when we turn the bias tape over. So you see here, it has a finished edge when we do that, and that's why we do that. So next we want to come to our ironing board. Before we turn our bias tape over, we want to give it a good press. That'll make it more smooth and easier to do. So, turning your pillowcase to the wrong side with your seam, with your bias strip and your neckline, iron that seam up towards your bias tape and just go around your neckline doing that, making sure that it's taut. So once we finish flattening that seam, we're going to take it off the ironing board. This is what it looks like on the outside. Nice and smooth finish right here. So what we're going to do now is fold over the bias tape once and fold it over again. But before we do that, we need to clip the seam that we just made in order to make it lay flat. So where we sewed before, the bias tape to the neckline, just make clips. Make sure that you don't go through the stitch line. It doesn't have to be scientific, just all around and these snips. Make sure you're only cutting the seam. This is all we're cutting, and we're not cutting through this. We're not cutting through here, our stitch line. So now we've made our snips all around the neckline. We're gonna lay our seam back flat like we had it before when we were ironing. And we're just gonna take this. You see the fold here that's already in the bias tape. We're gonna fold over along that line down over our seam. Let me show you that again. This is the fold in our bias tape right here. We're just gonna fold it over like this. And we're gonna do that all the way around. Making sure that this is encased in the bias tape. I'm gonna fold it all the way around. When you get to this end right here with the overlap, make sure that the outside folded edge encases the inside raw edge before you turn it over. That way, you'll have a nice folded finished edge right here. So we folded over the bias tape, met our stitch line. We're going to take our friendly iron one more time and iron it down all around the collar. Taking care, once again, where the edges meet to make sure that you have your finished edge on the outside and the unfinished edge folded neatly inside. Once we do that, we're going to fold it over one more time so that the bias tape will be on the inside. So when we fold it over one more time, the outside edge will not show the bias tape and the inside edge will be finished. So we're going to press this down all around one more time, and then we're going to sew it down. Bring the shirt over to your sewing machine and line up the edge of the presser foot with the edge of the collar. Starting at a shoulder seam, start sewing around so you can sew the bias tape down. Make sure your fabric is flat underneath. When you come to the end, go over your beginning stitches, just to make sure that your stitches don't come out. Make sure you cut off your stray threads. Keep it pretty, sorors. Turn your shirt inside out. We're almost there, sorors. Lay it down. So what we're gonna do now is sew up the sides and the sleeves. So, match your sides. Make sure your bottoms match. Making sure your ends match. And pin it down. You especially want to make sure that your corners match. Do this on both sides and sew around. Using a 3/8 inch seam, go from the bottom and around the sleeve. Do a back stitch at the bottom for stability. When you get to the underarm area, pivot. Put your needle down, lift the foot up, and pivot your material. And continue. Do a back stitch. Do the same thing on the other side. So our edges are frayed, you can see here. So in order to keep them from fraying, take some pinking shears and cut. If you have a serger, you can also serge the ends. At the underarm, you want to cut a slit so that it lays flat, just like we did for the collar. Do not cut through the stitching. Just make a couple of small cuts. Come to the ironing board and open up your side seams. Lay them flat and iron them open. Just kind of finesse your way around the underarm seams. Go up as high as you can. Open those up too. So the last thing, we're on the last step, sorors. We want to make a narrow hem along the bottom and along the sleeves. So what you're going to do first is make a 1/4 inch turn at the bottom. and iron it in place. Now I can usually eyeball it, but if you need to use a hem gauge, you line it up along the 1/4 inch and iron. Do it all the way around. Once we've done our first 1/4 inch turn of the material all the way around, we're going to do it one more time so that our raw edges will not be showing. And iron it down. Do that all the way around. So sewers, we're coming over to the sewing machine. This is the hem that we just ironed down, but we're gonna stitch on the outside so it'll be neat. So put your fabric down, line it up. I'm lining it up right about here. I'm using my presser foot so I can do a top stitch on the bottom line. And just stitch right around, making sure that everything is folded and neat underneath. When you're close to the end, make sure that you go over your beginning stitches so you put some stability in your stitch. And then you can stop. Snip your threads. Any overhanging, you want to keep it pretty sorors. Bring it to the ironing board, giving it one final press. Pay special attention to the underarm area. Press it as flat as it'll go. Press down your neckline one more time. And that's it. You have a shirt.
Sewers, I hope you enjoyed the video. Now it's your turn.